Hey guys, and welcome back to Trekyards. He's Mike Sussman, our special guest.
Samuel, Commander Samuel.
And he's Stuart Foley, Captain Foley. Stuart and Mike. We've got a new ship. Which is a long-running joke of ours, maybe. Well, I see a ship. What do you mean, Stuart? We've got a new ship. It's from a thing called Star Trek United, the 7-season arc of President Archer's world in Star Trek. Wow, this is from the future or something. This is crazy.
This is a special episode because we're talking ships, and not only that, but we're talking a ship and ships designed by Andrew Probert as well for a possible maybe new series of Star Trek, hopefully someday.
That's like a bit of a timeline-based episode. Like we're reviewing a ship before it's released in a show that hasn't been commissioned yet, but reviewing it seriously with the sort of design team.
So there should be a little background here. So
yes, please do.
Yes, that's what you're here for.
Clearly, there's there have been some post social media posts, some entertainment news stories about this television show idea that Scott Bakula and I have been pitching called Star Trek United. And the great Andrew Probert, who I'm sure if you're watching Trekyards, that name is very familiar to you, one of the designers of the refit Enterprise from Star Trek: The Motion Picture, the designer of the Enterprise D from Next Generation, so many other great projects over the years. I think he worked on the DeLorean from Back to the Future,
the Cylons from BSG,
the Cylons from Battlestar,
Airwolf from Airwolf.
Airwolf. Oh, I was unaware of that. So much incredible work over the years. And I think he doesn't get enough credit because for me, and this kind of ties into why I'm talking to you guys right now and why I watch your show, why I am a viewer and a subscriber. The Enterprise, or Voyager, Discovery, whatever ship you're talking about, that is a character on these shows that is as important as a Captain Kirk, a Captain Picard, a Captain Burnham, you name it. And Andy created those ships. And helped create them. And certainly with the Enterprise D, which to me is just like a sculpture of a starship. And it's amazing to look at and amazing to look at on screen. Out of the blue, I don't really know Andrew. We follow each other on socials. And every now and then I've liked drawings of his that he posts. And he reached out to me and said, I've been hearing about this new show that isn't a show. By the way, it is not development with Paramount Pictures or anybody. It was a pitch. It was a pitch that was passed on. Thank you, but no thank you. However, it has sort of surfaced again, as we've discussed in other videos. Andy wanted to know about it. And I said, well, it's funny you should say this, Andy, because since I took this old idea out of the drawer and have been talking about it for the last couple of weeks, I can't quite get it out of my head. And I realize there are a lot of things that need designing. And my gosh, who better than the great Andrew Probert to come up with some of these ship designs. And the ship that made sense to talk about, essentially a consular starship, a diplomatic vessel that would be the Federation president's main mode of transport, just as the United States president has Air Force One. This would be Starfleet One or Federation One. It would be a small starship, a cross between like a big shuttle and an actual starship. And this would be how the president would get around on from one diplomatic mission to another and visit the far-flung worlds of the young Federation. So completely on his own for free, decided to start doing up some drawings. And I told him it was fortuitous that he was talking to me, because my first instinct when I was just thinking about that ship was that perhaps it would be an ancestor of a ship that he designed for Star Trek: The Motion Picture, which I've always loved, which is the Vulcan shuttle. You know, in that era, in the 23rd or even the 22nd century, the warp engines would be so honking big that you would need a shuttlecraft to separate from you. You'd have to leave the warp sled behind while your shuttle section went off on to dock or land somewhere. And that was my first instinct for, well, perhaps what if Archer's ship was like that? So he started some drawings along those lines.
So I guess the first page, Mike 1, I mean, that's definitely a TOS shuttle, but not. And disconnects. I mean, that's just What did you think when you first saw this page of sketches? Because it's probably pretty surreal.
So ultimately, Andy and I talked, and I pointed out to him that this was actually, these are great. I love these designs, but I feel like I had erred in suggesting that they be more like his Vulcan shuttle from the motion picture. Because what I realized, and he even put in the corner there, presidential shuttle. This is a great design for presidential shuttle, but what I needed was a presidential ship. And so I love this. I love everything he's got. I love particularly the one on the lower right there. That's separating.
The whole
Looks a
bottom
bit
section
like
is great.
But it's so funny. It's absolutely pitch perfect Starfleet Vulcan warp sled. Like it just is that.
And also, the separated segment on the right there on the bottom looks like the shuttle from Star Trek 6. Or the
Oh yeah,
I forget what it's
little
called.
Oh, sure. Oh, the one that
Predecessor.
became the Janolan, right?
Mhm.
Isn't that the same ship
Yeah.
that they
Yeah.
slapped a couple of nacelles on? It also gets into the question of, we haven't seen starships in this era. The last Federation ship or Earth Starfleet ship we've seen was the NX-01. And now if this era that we're talking about hypothetically here, there's 100 years between, say, Discovery season 1 and the final season of Enterprise. So there's potentially a lot of design iterations to go on in that era. How is it different? How is this era different not only from the NX and that technology, but how is it different from TOS? And again, one idea is embracing Andy's idea of this warp sled. That the warp drive is a bit more primitive and bigger, and so you need this sort of type of concept. So I think this ship, while not being appropriate to Archer's consular ship, I think this is a very cool design, and I would want to see this or something a lot like it in the show, because I think you would still need warp shuttles.
No, I love that. These are great. And like I say, engines aren't exactly right, but version 1. And this is a very, this could be rewrite in TOS. I think Matt Jeffries would love this. I don't know about you, Stu. I think he would be right on this. And he knew Matt, and that makes sense.
We do have another page of drawings,
Oof.
which I think...
Wow.
Okay, you see, what you're saying is you don't want a shuttle. You want a larger ship that he can kind of go around and do things on. So I assume that this was the idea, that you had already told Andrew this to get this sheet, because there's a little bit different designs going on here.
A lot of beautiful variety here as well. This is amazing.
Yes.
So there's a lot of cool stuff on here. So Andy and I jumped on the phone, and I told him more how much I loved what he'd come up with, but it wasn't, I felt, what this needed. And it needed to be a much bigger ship. And he actually pointed me to a design on his Instagram page where he had a ship that had this sort of triangular look to it. But I think it was designed as more of like a 24th century type of vessel, very sleek nacelles. And I thought it was a very cool design. I don't know what he was designing it for, but he suggested I look at it.
Does that sometimes?
Just for fun. I mean, I draw for fun. And I said, well, if it had engines that looked like they belonged a little more to the era, that would be a great design. And so he played around with that. Now, that design that we're talking about is really, so there were 3 ships towards the bottom there, those triangular looking ships, which are different, but, obviously of the same sort of family. And and you can see he kept, which I wanted him to keep, this breakaway shuttle section, which is not unlike, the captain's yacht that we've seen on later ships, or rarely see. And so it kept that separation ability, which I thought was really cool. So so there is a shuttle component to it that'll break off, go, land on a planet, and Archer gets to greet the locals, and the ship would remain in orbit. And the ship is large enough, so there would be sleeping quarters and staterooms. And there's even a little breakdown there on the bottom of how many decks it could potentially have. Let's look at the NX. And when I said NX, I was thinking more NX-01, but it could very well have been the Franklin as well. Although I guess it's a much smaller ship. Keep those ships in mind in terms of aesthetic, because that was the last thing chronologically we saw in these shows. And I would want these to be believable as ships that would follow on from those designs.
So there's only one saucer here. Was that an instruction to not use the saucer? It has a distinct, definitive, except Voyager, hero Enterprise vibe. Was no saucer very much let's stay away, or is it just kind of what happened to happen?
I guess he was just inspired. I mean, that's an interesting looking vessel. We did talk about because I gave him basically a platter. It's so funny to be talking about a television show that doesn't exist. You know, I don't have an art department. I don't have any money to pay anybody. But he, you know, just wanted to doodle up some designs. But we did talk about obviously we would need to see Archer ship, but we would also want to see, you know, what is the Starfleet ship that comes after NX with the technology not only of the Earth Starfleet, but perhaps with Vulcan, Andorian, Tellarite influences. What would that ship look like? That is a much longer conversation, and I think we'll wait until there's
A show.
there's a show before we get into all of that. But so that was very much on. I think his mind as well is mine because he did actually drop some sketches that I'm not including here for what that successor vessel would look like, and many of those are cool designs. So I think maybe this was perhaps floating around in his head when he was talking about. Or we were talking about a Starfleet successor to the NX, a Federation successor. So, I mean, that's very interesting. I think that's a cool design. But I did want Archer ship to be more distinct and a little fresher. But these are all super cool. I would love to see any and all of these.
But that definitely keeps a nice flow, though, to keep the hero ship, which is not the hero ship of our characters, but of the era, be the saucer. That's the legacy we're continuing. This is not that. So irrespective of being the hero of this story, a la Voyager doesn't need to be you can do its own thing. And certainly, like John Eves likes to do, this ship, the one at the bottom, which we've got another sketch of in a second, it feels fast. And if you're going to do a presidential ship, it needs to be the fastest for both escape and getting to places. So having it be this sort of shape, while not so logically aerodynamic for space, it does trick the brain thinking it's fast, because that does look fast. I think you'll agree, Stuart. That looks zippy.
And my favorite's the purple one from at the bottom there with the detachable. I think that the struts on that are the best for my eye. But
well, they're different, aren't they? Well, I quite like the one above it, which has more of an NX feel. That to me feels like the predecessor. If you're going like the NX Intrepid, the Emmett, all those ones. But actually, I like all the ones with the boxy front. The one above it is actually really great. I'm not sure what the blue back bit is, but I like using the NX deflector style glow. That's kind of cool to have that as a piece.
But this final one is more of what's, I can see being the hero ship for Archer. You can see the shuttle attached at the front there. You get the sense of scale with the decks. Yeah, this is actually really good, and I like the struts on this. Good layout.
So I think ultimately the final design would differ, but I love where this is going. At one point I did talk to him about nacelles that might deploy, and I thought perhaps looking at this that these might actually move into position, but I don't think so. I don't think that's how it just looks like they could. And obviously, Voyager had I think they probably had a special name for what those nacelles did, but they moved, and that was cool. And perhaps something like this could do that as well. But they're also, these are not racing cars. They have to make sense. And but I love that. I love that those three bottom designs for me. It's a little bit of a Sophie's choice. They're all really cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I quite like that. The NX era is defined by its sort of flat bottom of ships. A benefit and a curse, very distinct, but they're two-dimensional. So by having a very straight flat bottom and then the secondary hull of the engineering sector, very much like the NX Reef, which I'm sure Andy knows about, you kind of get both designs. But this, as I'm imagining it more than just the very simple lines we have here, that it would feel an integrated secondary hull, something we've pushed forward. Now it's part of the design rather than add-on.
Yes, I mean, one of my in my discussions with Andy, I didn't want to evoke the classic Constitution too much. So the idea that you have this sort of attached secondary hull that's not quite a secondary hull as we know it on the other ships, that was really appealing to me.
Well, it makes sense that additional hull gives you the higher warp that you need. Hence, you need it. That's where tech evolved, right?
But it is great fun to be noodling this stuff with Andy Probert. I never in a million years would have imagined that would have been the case. So I hope he's had fun doing this as well. It's been terrific.
But
hopefully we'll get to see some of these someday.
but I have a hard-hitting question that links to a future episode on the Intermediate Darkly. Is there a dot at the back for aft torpedoes? And if not, are you going to make sure it's included?
Yeah, how many weapons are on this thing?
Aft torpedoes, Mike.
We just that's a good question. I don't know. I would say a ship of this size definitely has defenses. I don't know if it has torpedoes in this era.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
Yeah. You can't leave the president untorpedoed.
It should. Well, he would also travel with, escorts as well that would be heavily armed. So,
Yes.
but maybe they would. Would they be aft torpedoes as well? I have to think about that. That's very expensive.
Thank you for bringing these to us. Hopefully, someday we'll see these on screen in some form or another. But it was great looking at them, and looking at Andrew's sketches are always fantastic. So, thank you for allowing us to take a look at these. We appreciate that.
And bringing him in. I mean, that's such a lovely thing. Well, he brought himself in and working with him. It's just, that's a legacy that we have in these late eras of Trek. There are still those classic designers still 100% waiting for the call, as we saw in Picard season 3, right? Bring Doug and such back. They're ready for that call, and they love Trek just as much as they did then, as they do now, decades later. It's mad.
It's the blessing and the curse of Star Trek. I think if you've worked on it in a creative capacity, it never quite leaves your head. It can for a little time. You can kind of push it back, but it doesn't take much for it to come rushing back. So
yeah.
But no, I'm grateful for Andy to just play around with these, conjectural designs for a ship on a TV show that doesn't exist
yet.
Perfect. Yes. Guys, comment down below what was your favorite design out of all these we looked at. We want to read those and see what you guys are thinking. And again, thank you to Mike for joining us. We really appreciate you. And looking forward to more episodes with you in the future. So until next time, I'm going to pick.
Mike Sussman. I'm Mike Sussman.
Oh,
yes,
he's kind of early.
I think
he's Commander Calkins.
There you go.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye.